I think we have to start with kind of what's on most people's minds. And that's what happened last week with Liberation Day,
Yes, right.
right? And so let's start with, kind of the concept of the tariff. What is the objective, do you think, behind, President Trump trying to impose these tariffs? And kind of, I want to walk through, kind of downstream effects over time. But let's start at a very high level. What do you think is the motivation for the tariffs that are being implemented today?
Well, there's something about Donald Trump's mind. He is an adventuresome sort. If you go back to past applications of tariff, the Smoot-Hawley tariff came in 1930, right after the stock market crash. And it didn't work. In fact, what it did is it caused other countries to retaliate, and they got kind of hostile attitudes. The trade war was happening. And then we got World War II. So
you're not extrapolating those same effects.
No, I'm not extrapolating, but the rationale for the tariffs just doesn't make sense to me. And it seems like they're dangerous. He put a tariff on Canada, their closest friendly country, and suddenly there's some feeling of antagonism.
Right.
And these feelings matter politically. And I think that there is something connected to tariffs that led to World War II.
A lot of people aren't familiar with Smoot-Hawley and what happened there. You said it didn't work. What was the process there, and why don't you think the tariffs worked to bring back resilience post this, early stages of the Great Depression?
Well, it's putting a tax on something that encourages a response from other countries in the form of taxes. And why would that be stimulating to an economy? Also, it brings in a trade war, which unsettles people, and so they don't feel like spending money at a time like this. So that may bring on a recession. That's what happened in the Smoot-Hawley tariff.
I mean, given that we saw some higher levels of inflation the last few years, the market has treated it pretty calmly. I mean, the interest rates are higher, of course, as you would expect.
Yeah.
But it seems that there's been this confidence that we're going to go back to these target levels of, what the Fed targets at 2% or so.
But that they don't even accept the 2%. They think they will go back down.
Yeah.
But the Fed isn't going to let prices fall.
Right. And why is that?
Because they think that falling prices are accompany bad economic conditions.
Yeah.
So in the Great Depression, for much of the 1930s, prices were slowly falling. So that means also consumers might think then, should I buy a car this year or should I just wait? I might as well hold off and not...
it's getting cheaper.
It's getting cheaper.
Right. That's what they call the deflationary spiral, right?
Yeah.
And so it's funny you bring both of those up because you have politicians saying, I'm going to bring prices down, which the Fed won't accept, right? Because that creates deflation.
Right.
So, I think that's a challenge for this environment. And then we tack on the tariffs, and, they're broad-based. No one really knows still what the plan is. But I think that people are very concerned about this, that, wait, I thought the exporting country paid the tariff. Canada's going to pay the tariff we put on their goods, right?
Yeah.
So, again, that's the narrative taking hold. But when you think about inflation, the Fed used a dangerous word at the last press conference, and Jay let the T word slip again. He said the impacts from tariffs would be transitory. And remember, he was castigated for using transitory on inflation before. So do you think that this policy of the tariffs leads to some level of inflation?
I think so, because they'll be retaliated, and it will interfere with trade. Companies won't have the right thing. They have to retool and maybe get different expertise. And they don't want to do that because they think this might be temporary.
Yeah. Well, we saw that the first time Trump was in office that a lot of it was negotiation, right? It was that I'm going to threaten something.
Well, because he has this book, The Art of the Deal,
That's right.
which presents him as a genius at making deals. That was written. It was stable genius. Trump does have some interesting points.
I'd like for our viewers to hear like your thoughts on how inflation does impact valuation and how we should be thinking about kind of the investing landscape going forward if we have a higher level. Because remember, from the global financial crisis until the pandemic, we had very moderate levels of inflation. We had coordinated policies from central banks around the world, at least in the developed world. We were all pursuing similar goals. There was a lot of fiscal stimulus. There was a lot of intervention from the central banks. We managed through that. I don't feel like this is a world of cooperation today.
Yeah, and that is worrisome. And people, their self-esteem is built on our country being misunderstood or blamed when we're innocent. And these things do encourage warlike fear. They call it a trade war. They could call it a trade game.
Sure doesn't feel like a game, does it? Let's talk about that trust and the fidelity that should exist among mankind, right? And we're having this trade war. I'll put it in air quotes there. How do we get to that cohesive level again, right? I just think about the old trading adage that bear markets are built on cooperation, right? When things are going well, everybody feels there's something strong going on. That drives prices, drives activity. Isn't this kind of sentiment right now changing that dynamic?
Right. Well, after the world wars were examples of a time of change, especially World War II. After that, with the Holocaust that was revealed after the war, after that, the attitude toward dictators was decidedly negative, and World War narratives continued to drive their thinking. But now it's been 75 years since the World War II experience. I think that there would be a tendency to forget it. Mm-hmm. If you look at search on the web, though, you'll find that there's a lot of memories of World War II. So it hasn't affected our military actions very much yet. But I could see that the narrative could come back. The other thing is that people have to take chances with their training and education. And it's not clear that they need advice on how to do that.
Isn't that some of what we're seeing in this, the narrative taking hold of the tariffs and trying to reshore jobs, trying to rebuild manufacturing? Isn't there some of that playing on that psyche of that, you don't have to be an elitist and an academic. You can be a worker and have a good living, right?
Yeah.
And so that really resonates with people, but are we equipped? Look, we can do it, obviously, in this country, right? We had manufacturing.
We could if there were a will to do it.
But it's capital intensive. It takes time to build. It's going to take time to create those. You got to have the training behind it. It's a long road, and maybe the road is, it is paved to El Dorado or something, but it's a long, hard slog to do that.
There's no surprise that immigration is a big factor in politics these days, and people see dangers to their own welfare in that.
I'm thinking through the tariffs. I'm trying to think through not just the revenue streams or how the impact is, but are there other ways that the other nations can impact us or harm us to inflict pain, kind of as we're trying to do to their export business? Is there other mechanisms that are on your mind that you think through that some of these sovereign entities may use against us? Like, if we're imposing a high tariff on their stuff, but we don't import a lot to their country, you can't just tit for tat tariff, right?
Well, there's a lot of things you can do in a trade war. But to say they might shut down their access to rare earth metals that we need for our advanced electronic devices. That's why I hate the sound of trade war. It shouldn't be a war, and the Chinese people are perfectly nice. I liked them when I visited there.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with this, is that we cast a wide net when we say this stuff. But, when you visit cities, counties, countries, you realize they're just all people, right? In general.
Yeah, and they're more similar than you have stereotypes which are imagined.